be talking about the 2026 State of Utility Rebates in Minnesota. And here we have Tony with me. We'll introduce ourselves just in a minute. And so I'll let Tony go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Beman, the sales strategy manager for the Center for Energy and Environment. We've administered Xcel Energy small business lighting program since the year 2000, and we incorporated a indoor horticulture lighting rebate for Xcel Energy customers about 2.5 years ago.
And I'm Alexis, and I represent What Rebates. We're a rebate processing company based in the US, and we operate in Canada and the United States. So we basically help pushing paperwork for utility companies, and in some cases we're also able to finance project upfront when it's backed by a reservation letter. So we'll go through this. Now, what we'll cover today is we basically don't want to just focus on Xcel Energy, and so we'll talk about the different utilities. There's about like 163 utilities in Minnesota, so we'll go through different incentives that are available for growers in the states, and we'll go a little bit through the equipment that qualifies and what kind of criteria are used to define the rebate incentive, as well as going a little bit more in details into the CE program with Tony today. So your utility matters, and that's why we partner with CE for this presentation. Depending of your location, you'll have a different utility, and depending of that utility, you'll have different parameters, different incentives. To give you an idea, Xcel for right now, there's only like about 3 utilities out of the 163. There's probably 3 of them that is like 90% of the market, right? There's a lot of them, but they've all different parameters, all different incentives. So we'll go through this to give you an idea about Xcel. Xcel would cover 60% of the project. It really depends of the size of your project. So if it's below 5,000 square feet, it would be with CEE, and if it's above that, then it would be with Xcel Energy. So the program is slightly different, but Xcel Energy has one of the best rebate in the industry and in the country. Actually, I don't know if you heard, but there was a huge, they had a $40 million budget in Colorado in the last couple of years. And every year they used to, they were able to spend it, meaning that there's a large demand for those kind of incentives, especially in the horticulture and the horticultural space, where lights are using a lot of the energy, which probably about 65% of your energy bill comes from the lights you're using in your facilities. So that's something we'll go through today. And actually, we added this little QR code that you'll be able to find at the CE booth, and that will help you to find a location that is within the Xcel territory. And so that's really important for you to, when you start your facility, to look at who is your utility provider. And if Xcel is your utility provider, that's a huge benefit for you, bro. It'll be, you'll be able to get a huge return on your investment straight up. And that's, something that a lot of people are looking to achieve when they start a new business. Then we'll go through, those are the utilities. As I mentioned, there's about 3 or 4 that represent 90% of the market. I think Xcel is probably like 60%. You have another couple of them that are quite present in the northern territories. You have Autotel, Minnesota Power. As you can see here, there's different caps. So we'll go through this specifically for the CE program, but each utility have different parameters and different caps and incentives and inspection policies. So the idea is that, let's say, for example, you have a project and they would cap incentives to a certain amount of that project cost. And so you can see on this table the different caps for each utility. If you have a project and you are with, let's say, Minnesota Power or any other utility as not Xcel, you can come at the end of the show, at the end of the presentation, or come to see us at the booth, and then we'll help you navigate the program and the incentives, so to make sure that you can capture the maximum incentive for your project. And so to the different parameters that you have to look at, and first of all, the location. As I mentioned, your location would determine which utility company you're at. sometimes, in Colorado, for example, you go for in MOFAT, and then you have all of an area is Excel, and then right in front you have another utility, and so you have a huge disadvantage for those people that they're not going to be able to capture any rebates with the other companies. So looking at where your facility will be is one of the main factor before starting everything, is finding a location that has a utility company with incentive for your choices for your energy efficient equipment. Then what kind of we'll dive in a little bit more about the one-stop program right now. So what kind of facility do you have? Are you doing indoor or greenhouse? And so, for example, as in the specific case of CEE, they only qualify if it's an indoor facility, so greenhouses will not be eligible through the one-stop program. If you're looking at Excel, it would be eligible under different parameters, which is a custom, which are custom programs. We'll just focus on the prescriptive for now, but we'll show you some different example at the end of customs and prescriptives, which are a bit different. And what kind of is this retrofit or is it a new construction? So, in this state, as a lot of new construction going on, obviously since the market just opened, but that's something that you need to look at as well at different state, different utility, and obviously like depending on the utility you're using, you'll have different like parameters. And the one here is that new construction does not qualify, so you need to have an existing building. That's the main thing, because obviously all of those would be kind of new construction, but we just need to have a building that is actually existing, and that's kind of like the only thing they'll care about. Then the canopy size again, if it's below 5,000 square feet, you would be dealing with Tony and his team. And if it's above, then you'll be looking at Excel. So the incentives are sensibly different between the two. We'll go through it after this, but you need to take that into account when you're opening your facility. And then what kind of equipment does qualify as well? If you look at CE, they would only look into the lighting side of your project. If you're looking with Excel, for example, or other utility companies, they will be looking at the dehumidifiers, any kind of equipment really that would be saving energy. But you can, well, obviously HVAC and dehumidifier is probably not the best example, but HVAC, VFDs, you have dehumidifier, HVAC. You can always get a rebate on those equipment as well. They're not as generous as the one for lighting. But for example, with the Excel, let's say in Colorado, the experience we have in this state, we'll be able to cover between 15 and 25% of your equipment. So it's always better than nothing. For the lighting, obviously, it goes up to 60%. So that's a huge advantage when you opening a facility. So here are the kind of equipment that you need to grow. And those are the equipment, again, that would qualify. So you have a bunch of equipment. Sometimes are not even there, like VFDs or fans sometimes as well. The interesting thing is that we'll talk today about the commercial aspect of things. But if you look at Excel, they also do have a program for residential. So as I just wanted to mention it today. If you have just an opportunity for you, if you're just caregiver or you want to grow in your basement, you can have up to 8 lights, and then up to 8 lights, and they don't do basically post inspection, so you can get rebates on those lights even if you are residential customer. So that's also interesting to look at. But yeah, all the facilities now that we see, they do have obviously grow lights, HVAC system, dehumidifiers, and then environmental controls. That became a bigger aspect of energy efficiency. Having a controller that can monitor every data in your grow room, and obviously adapt the strategy with those data to be able to save energy is a big thing. And hopefully there'll be more and more incentives for those kind of equipment in the future. Could be with CE or with Excel. Now we'll dive in a little bit more about the CE program itself. So I'll show you after this slide. You'll see how they designed the program, which is actually quite interesting, is PP by PPE, right? So the more efficient your equipment is, the more money you'll get against your equipment. So most of the light right now, they would be above 2.8, whereas an HPS before was 1.8. So you do have, technically the same amount of photon that would go to your plant from an HPS at 1.8 ppe with a light that's like 700 watt with a 3.0 ppe. So the interesting thing is that now you don't need to have a super powerful light to get the amount of photon that your plant needs to grow and the right in any stage. So that's something to look at when you're doing your purchase, because obviously if you get a light that is consuming less wattage, you'll save energy on your bill, everyday bill, and that's something that is to look at. So to look at the rebate program that CE has is up to $1.06 per watt. So let's say you have 1,000 watt fixture that is at 3.6, right? I can't remember what's the actual. So you have it here. Oh, 4.0. So if you have a 4.0, which is really rare in the cultivation, that would mean that the light has a lot of reds, which is not really the spectrum you want when you're growing cannabis. But we can see a lot of lights now that above, above 2.8 at least. But just to give you an idea, for example, in California, they just raised their requirements to be 3.24. So any light that is below 3.24 pp wouldn't qualify for any rebate in that state. So hopefully we're not there yet in Minnesota, because there's not many lights that are above 3.2. But you can see a lot of manufacturers, especially in the horticultural space, I'd say in more outside of cannabis, when you're growing tomatoes, for example, and you can use that more of a blood pool spectrum, then it would raise the PPE quite a bit, and then that's where you could get those kind of rebate. For cannabis, I'd say when you're using a full spectrum, you would be something around 2.8 and 3.2, which would give you above 93 cents per watt install, which is a really great return on your investment for lighting. And if you have a business that's a bit bigger, and then you have a mezzo, for example, license, then you deal directly with Xcel, and then they'll pay you 70 cents per watt, and that's pretty much what it is, directly through Xcel Energy, and you'll be able to bundle it with HVAC and dehumidifiers. And just to actually talk about this program, and they developed it in Colorado, and it was $4 per pint. And so Xcel is looking at pushing this program for dehumidifiers in Minnesota as well. So you'll be able to get pretty good return on your dehumidifier as well soon. And they do have a requirement that's quite high, the same thing as the lights, as I mentioned in California, where the minimum is 3.24. They would have a requirement here, which is a liter. It's just kind of a requirement of the equipment itself. So they kind of you'd only be able to get incentives on 4 piece of dehumidifiers. But if you want more information about it, you can always come to the booth, and we'd be happy to help you to see which one qualifies for you grow. To go back to kind of like an indoor facility here, let's say you look at a 5,000 square feet facility with 300 lights, and we wanted to kind of show you the influence of PP compared to an HPS, right? So you have this HPS light that would consume 169,000 kilowatt during the year, or actually the old facility. But if you look at the comparison between the HPS, which is at 1.8 ppe, to 648 watt at 3.0 ppe, that's exactly the same amount of photon that would get out that light. So your plant would receive the same amount of photon and grow just as the same. The spectrum would be a little bit different, obviously, but at the end of the year, what's interesting is that you would be saving 40% on your energy bill. And obviously that's something that Xcel would like as well, because those programs they're put in place to reduce the reduce the energy consumption on their grid. And so that's something that if you focus on an equipment that gives the plant the same amount of fun it needs to grow, but saves 40% on energy, and obviously Xcel like that the constraint is taking off their grid, and that's why those programs are for. So yeah, look at a 650 to 750 watt light that is around 3.0 ppe, and that is something that should be exactly just be fine for your light, compared to an HPS if you are familiar with the HPS growing. As at the end of the day, if you look at how much you would save your facility for 300 fixture facilities, 5,000 square feet, you'd be looking at $100,000 a year that would be that you'd be saving. So worth looking at. Yeah, yeah, sure.
All right, hi guys. Alexi talked a little bit about this, but we again administer the rebate program for Xcel Energy only customers. So this is our process. Every utility will vary a little bit. But first step is just confirm that's an Xcel Energy location. Excuse me, that it's an existing building, not a greenhouse, etc. The second step that we're just working through with Xcel is making sure that the building that you're looking at cultivating in has ample power, both at the building and at the adjoining neighborhoods. They're trying to avoid some of the horror stories they ran into in Colorado, where everyone would put in, 500, 750 watt lights, HVAC, DHU, this, heavy equipment. They'd go to fire it up on day one with plants under the lights and everything, and it would blow the transformer, which had a 6-month lead time, and a service upgrade was going to cost $100,000 for the end user. And that wasn't part of their budget, wasn't part of their plan. So we're really trying to be diligent to not only secure an Xcel Energy location to be eligible for our program and get the best incentives in the state, making sure that that building has ample power, and we can walk you through that process and connect you with someone directly at Xcel Energy that'll handhold you through the process. We won't send you to a 800 number or something silly like that. We basically just ask you to jot down, what the equipment is that you're going to be putting in the building as best you can guess, what type of service is existing at the building, and then they'll look into their service territory maps and make sure that, or they'll confirm or deny the amount of service coming in. Once that's confirmed and we have enough service coming into the building, that's where we look at the project scope. And that's where we basically, how many fixtures, send a cut sheet, how many are in the bedroom, how many are in the flower room, are we doing any dimming, what are the rough material and installation costs, and then we can calculate the rebate, the energy savings, the payback. You'll see in a few examples that we have coming up that these paybacks and these energy savings are pretty big. I mean, just to put it in perspective, we have about 35 projects in the hopper for micro businesses that are only about a third of the total size. We can actually go up to 8,000 square feet, so 5,000 flower and say maybe 2,500 for veg. But anyways, these are averaging only about 2,000 square feet, either one, because that's the physical constraint of the building, or more commonly, that's all they can afford this year. So what their intent is to self-fund phase 2 and phase 3 to get up to that 8,000 square foot over time. But these 35 projects that I'm referencing, they're averaging $80,000 a building in rebates for phase 1 at about 1,900 square feet is all. To put that in perspective, in our world, that's the equivalent of about 35 million kilowatt hours of energy taken off the grid, or about 5,500 homes of electricity use taken off the grid, just with 35, what you'd say is small buildings physically. You're not going to drive by a cultivation and be blown away at how big it is. They're small buildings with very, very energy intense. Once you get the what we call the customer participation agreement, you sign off on that you're going to move forward on the project. We shoot that information over to Xcel Energy because, again, the scale of these rebates are substantial, and we don't want to surprise them at the end of the year claiming $3 million of rebates they weren't planning on. So we ask that you sign that participation agreement, shoot it our way. We'll make a note to Xcel, and then at that point you can order and install equipment. Excuse me, once the lights are up and operational, and a new wrinkle this year is we can't come for our post inspection until you actually have plants under the lights themselves. But that day, tag us in. We pride ourselves at being timely. We have yet to have an inspection that we weren't out there within 48 hours, providing that, again, the plants were there, et cetera. We had the invoices, stuff like that. But that's the process. It sounds a little complicated. Some of the things aren't really, in our wheelhouse with the, the service end or service capacity and things like that. But we're working through it. We'll help you every step of the way. I dug into all this already. We can maybe breeze through this. But like I said, location selection, service approval to ensure that you have enough power coming into the building. Those are the first 2 critical steps. Project scope is where we get all the information from your proposed vendor. We'll build out the rebate estimates. That's the document that you'll sign off on. At that point, you can move forward on the project, and then we'll schedule the inspection. Here's kind of a chronology of events, if that makes sense. So first, the clock starts ticking when we sign the participation agreement. Within 90 days is how much time you have that rebate reservation stays active. If that's not enough time to implement whatever the scope is that you're pursuing, just tag us in. Let us know. It's not a big deal. It's just kind of a general, guard post. This within 1 year inspection, that's on the Xcel side. So if you have a meso or a cultivation license, it may take them up to a year for that final inspection. As I mentioned, within our program, we're shooting for, say a 48 to 72 hour turnaround. And then once that's good, there's a post-inspection signature on an iPad. We gather the invoices from your partner, and we fill out all the paperwork for you, send it to Xcel. You get the physical check 6 to 8 weeks later. Just a handful of case studies that we'll jump into. This one, and kind of like I was talking about, it was only 800 square feet, so 40 fixtures, 900 watts, 2.8 PPE. So that ended up being about just shy of 90 cents a watt for incentives. The project cost was about $60,000. The rebate was $42,000. So as you can see, the net cost was less than $20,000 for those lights that aren't cheap. They're not cheap. So the more incentive we can throw at it, the better we're doing our job. And then back to that graph that Alexi was talking about, only 40 fixtures, but it's saving them almost $50,000 a year. So when they reach out to us for ensuing phases, we're just going to recreate this and just keep self-funding future growth as they become profitable. A little bit bigger room, and this is veg only. We had about 167 fixtures, similarly 900 watts, 2.8 PPE, so same rebate, guys. Project cost in that example was just over $200,000. Rebate kicked in about $150,000, so the net cost was $50,000 for the customer, while they're realizing almost $250,000 a year in savings. So you can back into the payback pretty easily. We've got a fully maximized facility here. So we've got 2,500 square foot veg, if you can read that. I don't know how small it is up there, guys. 125 fixtures, again, in that 850, 900 watt range. This one was a little bit more efficient at 3.1 PPE, so it got a few cents per watt higher. Flower was, again, 5,000 square feet, so a fully maximized micro. They used 312 of the same fixture, so same PPE, same rebate, right? This project was almost $650,000. The rebate picked up 450 of it for a net out of pocket close to 200, and they're realizing over $500,000 a year in energy savings. So even though the footprint of these buildings are small, the expenses that they're incurring on the front end and hopefully the expenses they're avoiding on the back end are big numbers. It's a very, very long-term decision. So comparing fixture types it doesn't bother us a minute. You want to have us bid out a couple fixtures for you with varying PPEs and wattages. We do that all the time. We have commercial lighting projects that are on phase 17. All right. I think you can jump in here.
Yeah. Actually, there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about what you said about the transformers, for example. So I remember you added the failure to engage Xcel Energy builder calls line, right? And you said 6 month time for transformers. I remember a couple of years ago when it was nearly close to a year, right? Especially in Colorado. And so that's something that you really want to look at and make sure that you size your power correctly, and then you have a team of professional that comes. And the good thing is that Xcel and CE, they're absolute professional in what they do, having a reservation letter as well attached to a reservation of funds is something that Xcel doesn't do. So working with CE, that you have some funds and then they're sent to Xcel. So that's something that you have a security on. Xcel, you do the application after you installed everything and you have everything powered up. So it's a bit of a different process, but also you mentioned Tony about the inspection. We worked, with in Colorado with Xcel. We've seen sometime, couple of months for inspection, and we see in Minnesota, you guys are really lucky because you have an inspection that happens within a week, and that's amazing. You get ready, you have your facility running, and those guys will come and do the post inspection and move your project to payment. So that's a huge advantage for the Minnesota market, and that's something that pretty much anyone should be looking at when they open a grow. So just to kind of like sum it up on what you should do, what you should not do. Well, you should now, because there's a couple of things that happens. Obviously, it's a first serve, first come, first serve pool of money. So let's say you have a budget of $40 million. If the budget at the end of August is all spent, then there won't be any money for you and for your project. So that's something that you should look at every year. At the beginning of the year, those budgets actually renew. So the first, the faster you're applying when you want to get that equipment, the better you have a chance to hit that budget. And looking at what happened, for example, in Xcel in Colorado, about a couple of years ago, they had way more application than they expected, and so there was a little challenge with their budget, and so they had to use the funds from another year to be able to fund the year that we all applied for. So something that you should do, as long as you know where you're going and what kind of equipment you want, just give us a call. Could be a Tony's team or our team, and then we'll help you navigate what are the incentives for each of the equipment you need. The rates as well. If you look, and normally we would look at energy efficiency as something that should be increasing. We are seeing in the last couple of years those incentives going down, even though the idea is for those utility companies to reduce the stress on their grid. Why? Is because you have a lot of new data centers and AI, companies that take a lot of that energy from their grid, and so those rates for energy, for horticulture especially, decreasing. So that's something that you want to look at, now, basically, before they go down. And obviously, being early mover, you log the best rates, and as Tony said, you would have like 90 days to sign. But then, for example, if you look at Excel, you have a look back period as well. So as long as your invoice is after January 14th of 2024, you can benefit of the 70 cents rate. So that's a good advantage for you guys as well. Yeah, and again, why would you get now? Is because you get a return on your investment on your equipment as long as it's energy efficient right away, and that's something that obviously you want to look at as an operator. We added this QR code if you want to get an estimate, and also if you go to the CE booth, you'll have the little QR code to select a facility within the territory. But anything you need, you have both our emails there, and if you want to pass to our booth and ask us question, we'll just open the floor now for a couple of questions. So if you do have questions, don't hesitate to ask them, and if not, we'll go. We can see you at our booth anytime during this show.
Any questions, guys? Brad?
Yeah, don't hesitate to swing by the booth. Thank you for coming today, and enjoy the show.